Before we start, I'll just point out if you go down to the description under the video, it's got a lot of links that'll take you to the Slack channel and take you back to our YouTube channel. And there's some other 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 fancy links there. Because YouTube won't let me put the title or the little images at the end, say here, go watch these other videos. About 50% of the time it'll let me do that, and the rest of the time it won't. So just go look at the description, open the description down below and take a look at it. So last week I was talking about I was trying to survey or I was trying to find the property line of where I live because my neighbor, in my opinion, is throwing crap across there and killing my grass. So I did a lot of research on. I spent about 2 weeks researching all the stuff on the internet, and I live in Minneapolis, and I can go to a Minneapolis property information and bring up a web page that will show it'll show a map of the city, and you zoom in where you live, and you can click on the little property lines, and it brings up information about the property. And then you can say there's also one you can click on that says show me the surveyed properties, and it brings up various ones scattered around. And the properties seem to be surveyed a long time ago. Everything around me was done in the 1920s. So about 100 years ago, they marked off these properties, and they may or may not have put marker pins at the corners of all these properties. So I found all that out by digging through, and I found a little map of where I actually live. So it showed uh, the property lines. Yeah, this showed the individual lots, and it turns out that apparently the way they control this, they just have, from one corner they just measure each mark going north and each mark going, say, west, and then they drop a little map saying that's where your property line should be. So when they did that, if they put marker pins in the corners, that would be the ultimate reference saying that's where they belong. So I finally got around, and like last Monday, I went out in the front yard with a shovel, and I marked everything starting in the north end. I put marks down to where I thought the point should be. And before I started digging, I measured from the south side, which is the middle of the street. I'm supposed to measure in 30 feet onto the property, and that's where it should be. And those two lines don't match up. So depending which direction I measure from, I get different numbers. So I think I picked the new number that was closer to the street and got out my shovel, started digging. I dug down about a foot and found nothing. Went down about 2 foot. I think I got down like 3 feet and didn't find anything. And thought, well, that's not going to work. So I started expanding the hole down below the ground level because the top of the ground was frozen enough that it wasn't easy to make the top bigger. So I was down underneath. I had probably like a 3 foot diameter hole that I was trying to find this thing. I still couldn't find it. So I thought, well, I should go closer to the street. So I started digging in that direction. And finally I hit something, which I didn't get quite as excited because I kept hitting little rocks and I kept hitting tree roots. And so I got excited up front and decided, well, I better not get too excited until I actually find something. If I hit something that was under the ground, and I'd poke at it and say, yeah, there's actually something there, and it seems to be metal. And I was expecting people tell me it's like a 3 foot to 6 foot piece of rebar that they'll just pound into the ground. And they say it's between 6 to 12 inches below the surface is where they'll leave these things. And when I found it, it's actually like a 3/4 inch diameter piece of steel rod. It's only like 10 to 12 inches long. So it's just kind of think of it just floating out in space under the ground there. If you knew where it was ahead of time, I could have dug in from the top and found it. But the way it was, I'd already dug down a lot deeper below it. So when I got to it and I started poking at it, all of a sudden the thing just fell out and fell in the bottom of my hole. So I pulled it out and I looked at it, and it's I'm sure it's steel, and it doesn't seem to be rusted or pitted or anything. So I'm just assuming that's the property marker I'm looking for. It could be somebody randomly buried some crap in the yard but I'm thinking it's close enough to where it's supposed to be that's probably what I'm supposed to be looking for. So I stuck it back in the indentation where it fell out of and put dirt in to hold it back in place. And then I measured, I think the top of it was like 11 inches below the surface, which is deeper than, I'd prefer in that case. And then I took one of those fiberglass poles like you put up when you put up by your sidewalk so you know where to plow your snow. So I stuck one of those in the ground right next to it and then went ahead and covered the whole thing back up. And then I did some measurements on that. And it does turn out that from that point, if I measure from there out into the middle of the street that's supposed to be 30 feet. It was close. It was like 31 or 29 and a half or something. So that it says that is approximately where it's supposed to be. And then I put my lines on the sidewalk, and as I go back up the other direction, I measure up 60 feet, another 60 feet, and that's where the disputed property line is. And it turns out that the lines coming from the north and the lines coming from the south seem to be about a foot difference between the two. And I gave that a lot of thought. And I think what happened was 50 years ago when they tore down a schoolhouse on this block and then bulldozed the whole thing. And then a guy came in and marked off the lots and apparently did put in some property markers. And then so I assume they started at one reference point in one of the corners and then just with a tape measure or whatever measured off where they thought the stuff should be and then put the markers in there. And then I think at the end of the block now where they've torn down a duplex that was owned by the city and they're putting up a 6-unit apartment building that's also owned by the city. I was talking to a guy who was out surveying one day there, and he kept looking at his tablet. He says, "Oh yeah, we put this one in," and it says it's reference to that one already. He looked up and said, "Oh, we put that one in too." So apparently, I assume the stuff has all been done um, after the original stuff done 50 years ago. So probably they came in from a different corner, and the whole thing is just off by a foot in that direction because they didn't use the same reference point to start with. So anyway, that's kind of where I'm at on that. I found an official pin on the south side of my property, and then there should be a pin straight north of that, 100 feet, 120 feet above that. And as I say, the two marks that I have are like a foot apart. And ideally, you should dig down and find the property marker, and then that will be the official mark that was put in 50 years ago, regardless of what it is going this other direction. And I also came to the conclusion if you had a metal detector, it'd be much easier than just trying to dig up your entire yard looking for this. I think I spent like 2 hours digging in my front yard trying to find this stupid thing because I didn't know exactly where it was. I didn't know what it should look like or anything else. So that was a conclusion I made out of that if I had a metal detector, it might have made the job fairly quick. Now, the fact that it's 12 inches under the ground, you might have to have a better metal detector. I don't know, but that's some of the conclusions I drew from that. And then the next thing was I was thinking about how do I get what would be the simplest way to get my GPS to work? Because what I did, I took this thing out, took my robot out, and parked it over one of the surveyed markers up at the where they're doing the construction stuff, and that's an ideal situation because the marker actually is at surface level and it's got a plastic cap on it, so without any digging or anything, you can see it right there. And I was able to just back my robot up so the antenna is here and then coming straight down this roll bar. So right about here, if I line it up with that and then the center of the robot, I just parked it on top of that to take my GPS readings. And the other problem is if you go out to this same Minneapolis website that shows the properties, you go up to the top and there's a tab that says open this in a map viewer. So you click on that and it takes you to Minneapolis ArcGIS. And there you zoom in, it looks the same, but now you've got better tools. You can put your cursor on a point and say, tell me the latitude and longitude of that. You can also do some measuring with that, but I don't know how accurate any of that stuff is because I was noticing that all the numbers I'm getting for that seem to be off by a foot so I think my new stuff, it'd be like 2 foot off and the original stuff would have been like 1 foot off. And I don't know, how valid the numbers are that I'm getting from this website because I don't know how serious they were when they built it. And by the time it goes through the whole internet and goes through your browser with all this various scaling, it's you probably can't trust it very much anyway. So anyway, none of the points seem to be the same yet. See, what did I do? I said, okay, how far off is that? I was trying to measure that distance because all I had was latitude and longitude. So I had to go through some screwing around to figure out how to convert the latitude and longitude into a distance in inches or feet or meters or whatever. And I decided that the one point that's clear at the north end of the property and then the one that's halfway down the block, the difference of those seemed to be, like four, what was it? 4 centimeters? No, whatever the distance was, it's probably like that 12 inches that I was talking about. Somehow I was able to play with the numbers long enough that the surveyed marker at the north and then the surveyed marker or the unsurveyed marker that I haven't found yet, both of those, the difference of those between the actual location and then or the measured location and then the GPS that they gave me seemed to be exactly the same. So it seems like if I had the valid number to start with, I could just park my robot here on top of a point, and with the RTK GPS, it should say, "Yep, you're supposed to be right here." But then after digging up that marker and finding out, well, somebody just measured it wrong somewhere along the line and it's off anyway, that's yet another problem that I would have to deal with. So since I ordered some more parts from Ardusimple in Spain, because they had their Black Friday special. They call it the Black Friday week special, and I ordered another one of these survey. Actually, it's this one. This is the one from this one is from Ardusimple. I ordered another one of those, and then in my box right now, the receivers are taped on the back here, and the new one has a plastic box here with the receivers in it. So anyway, I bought a new receiver and I bought a new antenna, and I should have bought the adapter you screw into the antenna, because I bought several of those last time, and now I have no idea where they are. So for right now, I can just take one off. Just unscrew one of these two antennas and take the adapter off. It's that 1/4 inch to 5/8 inch adapter, or you can go to the hardware store. I've done this before. You get a 5/8 inch bolt, and you have to hacksaw it off, so you got 1/2 inch of threads on the 5/8 inch section. Then you put it in a vise, you drill a hole in it and tap that for 1/4 inch. So you can make your own adapter, but it takes half the day, and it'd be easier to do brass, and you can't seem to find brass bolts. So if you're taking a steel bolt and doing all this stuff to it, it's more of a pain than I want to do. But for the moment, I can use that adapter. So if I put that antenna on top of either a tripod, or I've got a photographic monopod, so just an extendable single pole, I put that on for the antenna. And I was thinking, what's the quickest way to get the GPS to work? And I think if I plug the antenna into the board and then just run a USB cable with my on-the-go adapter to my cell phone, I think if I just power that up, I think the cell phone will power the GPS. I'd prefer not to do that, but I think to test it out, that should work. That'll power up the GPS. Then I've got that GNSS Master app that it was mentioned on the Ardusimple website, and that's what I'm using to get my correction data. So basically, you plug all that stuff together, it should power up the GPS, and then if I say connect the NTRIP server on the internet, and say I give it my account and my password and various other things, and it starts shoving correction data into the board, and then it's got a status screen on there. If I pull up the status screen, it'll tell me latitude, longitude. I think it's a UTM X and Y, and all the usual things like HDOP, horizontal dilution of precision. Like there's a vertical dilution of precision. So it's got all that kind of stuff on there. And then at the top, it says fixed type. And I haven't actually run it to see what shows up under that. I should, since it what I do on my robot, I just got I've got some Velcro on top of this laser scanner. So I stick the phone on that and then run the cable into my box here to make the thing work. So theoretically, at that point, if I just take it out of the yard and fire it up, I can look at that fixed type and it'll tell me how good it's working. And that might be, if I just want to know a latitude and longitude of a point, I should be able to walk up to it, put my pole on the ground, and make sure it's mainly vertical, because if it's off by a little bit, say if the pole's sticking up 5 feet and you're off by a few degrees, that moves you by an inch or two. So you got to pay attention to that. But that should be enough. And if I just either I'm supplied with a latitude and longitude, I could go to a point and try to find that point by moving around, or just stick it on a marked point and then take the latitude and longitude. I'd have to write it down. I don't think there's any way to automatically save that. So anyway, I figured that would probably work. And ideally, I'd like to take it a step further in that. So if I put something on the GPS receiver, just like on the robot right now, it's connected into one of the cables goes to the cell phone for correction data, and another connector goes to my ROS computer. So it's running the standard uBlox driver, and I can get all kinds of information out of the thing, and then either write it to the hard drive by doing a ROS bag record, or the last time I went out, I just opened up a separate window and said ROS topic echo, and I said, show me GPS/fix. And it was putting out, it puts out the latitude and longitude like all the, or the, I don't remember what I just said, but you want to run ROS topic echo and then say GPS fix. And it puts out, just blocks, a block here and then a block here and a block here. Every time it puts out a new number, it puts those out. So once you get at that point, you go, you do your shift control plus and make the text really big on the screen. So the number's like an inch tall. So then I was able, as I drive around, I just look down at it without having to squint at it in the sunlight. So that was a way to see the values. And if I wanted to, I could take that GPS to odom .py program and just modify that. The quickest thing would be going to take my reference latitude and longitude that I've used forever and just put in the numbers of where one of my known markers is. And then it'll give me an offset in meters in X and Y from that point as I move around. And then I should rescale it to feet since I'm doing everything in feet right now. But that would be a handy way to do that. I can just simply say, here's the new reference point, and then as I move around the property, it would say this is your XY offset from that location. And while I'm at it in that program, I could just have a key that I press a key, and it would just take all the numbers, like say your current, take the reference that you gave it, and then say here's your current latitude and longitude, here's your current XY offset in meters, and your XY offset in feet. And so each time I hit that, it would just store that to a file, so I could go back and play those back later to see what the points are. So that's kind of where I'm at on that. I was thinking, yeah, that might be the next step, because I don't know if I want to go the trouble of digging up the other property marker that probably is there, and it would be handier to use if I had a metal detector. And it could be the guy that's being the problem. He might have a metal detector because he seems to have all these other toys that he keeps pulling out. Says, oh, I got a couple extra sticks on my tree. He goes pull out his chainsaw, and he's got all the weed whackers, and he's got all that kind of stuff. So it could be he's got one that I'd say, there's a marker right there somewhere. If you had a metal detector, we could find it. So that might be a quick way to do it. And speaking of metal detectors, I look at it, I look at Harbor Freight, and they want at least $50, maybe $150 for metal detector. And since I want to use it for one thing, I don't want to spend any money on it. If I go to Hackaday, they've got like 20 or 30 different designs for really cheap metal detectors. And the question is, if I go to the trouble, spend a day or two putting one of those together, is that going to be able to find the metal that's buried in the ground? So that's another thing I have to decide. Do I want to do that, or should I just give up on this whole thing and just document all this so I can some days I point out to this guy, yeah, it'd be nice if you don't throw that crap in my yard. And he said, So, well, look, here's all the documentation. You don't have to spend several weeks pulling up all this stuff. And here's all the measurements I made. And maybe that would inspire him to, if you just get the crap out of there in the first place, which he's just throwing mulch on the ground, and he decided to throw it over against this rock that's mostly, 90% in my yard, but he decided to, about half that was his, I think is what his reasoning was. So if you just wouldn't put mulch down in the first place, if you just leave grass there, like it's been there for 30 years and there's never been a problem until he decided to start destroying his grass. So that's again, that's the two things I did this week. I went out and actually dug up a marker. I did a lot more measuring too, I guess, and wrote that down. And then the fact I was just trying to figure out how to get the quickest way to get a GPS to work. So I could, if I found out then where that marker actually is, the next one I haven't dug up yet. Then from there, I can just take my GPS and walk along the where I think the line is, and just take spray paint and put a line across the yard and say, well, this is where your property line is. And the other thing I noticed was I was basing it on a fence that runs across there. It could be most of the fence from the other neighbor is on his property. And it looks like on the other side of his property, somebody built a garage. It looks like it's either right on the property line or slightly across the property line on his stuff. And he should be more worried about that than trying to annoy people with his mulch. So that, well, eventually we'll see how this all turns out. So I guess that's all I have to complain about for today.
I think you said it was 5/8 to a 1/4 inch adapter. Does Ardusimple sell those?
Yes, I do. If you buy the kit from who's that? Nav. the $2,000 kit that everybody's buying that, Juan's got one of those. Whatever the name of that company is, Nav something. Anyway, if you buy their antenna kit, it comes with those adapters. And we kept losing those at work because we'd say, oh, somebody wants to try this out. So we'd send out an expensive GPS receiver, and we'd send out this antenna and they'd always send the accessory kit with it, which is the wrong thing to do. So they'd send that out, and when they'd come back a month or 6 months later, all the accessories were missing. So, if anything wasn't actually bolted onto the antenna at that point, somebody threw it in their desk drawer, and we'd lose those. So that's why I found out you can make your own by getting a steel bolt. Get like a 3-inch bolt that's got threads all the way up to the head. Then you have to take a hacksaw and cut that off. So you got 5/8 threads, and then you can drill a hole and tap it for the 1/4 inch. So you can actually make them, but it's more trouble than I want to go to. So the last time I ordered from Ardusimple, I ordered an antenna and a board, and then I got like 3 of those adapters, but I have no idea where they are. And they're nice brass adapters, and they just simply, if you wanted to, if you had a 5/8 inch bolt stuck up through. So if I wanted to, I could take this one off the front here and just drill that hole out to a 5/8 inch hole and put a bolt through there, and then take the adapter that's between there and put that on my other thing. Because you want the 1/4 inch adapter so you can put it on like a standard camera tripod, is why they adapt it down to that. So again, that's just more stuff to play with and think about. So. And I did end up with the official uBlox patch antennas, because when I bought this, basically I got one of those antennas for free, because they said it was on sale. So I got the board for the regular price, but they threw in a free patch antenna on that. And then before I was done, it says, oh, if you buy one of those patch antennas, we'll give you free shipping. So I said, give me another $55 antenna to save $20 on shipping. So anyway, so I've got 2 of those patch antennas, and I'll have to see if those work well enough, because I don't even know how to compare a patch antenna, one of these survey antennas. I don't know what to look for other than, how many satellites going to see, what's the signal strength on each satellite. And then I suppose you could set it up and say, put it in your yard and say over time, how accurate is the resulting position that it gives you. So that's something else. I could use one of those, and then I wouldn't have to get this adapter. But then you really should have like a metal plate for what do they call that? The ground plane, and then screw the antenna on that. And those are bigger than I thought they were going to be. Most of them, I figured it would be about this big. This is just something that I bought this like on Amazon for like $30. That's got a built-in GPS receiver and just a USB connector on it. But when it turns out, they're actually about this big. So they're like at least 3 inches square, maybe even a little bigger than that. So I didn't expect them to be that big. So I was surprised when I pulled them out of the box and saw how big they were. So that's something else I could try, is the newer antennas.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing if there's any different results in your new Ardusimple versus your older ones.
I think this new board should be the same version as the second board that I bought. And the first board, which came from the original Kickstarter, doesn't seem to work as well as the newer one. So it will be interesting to find out the 2 newer ones both work well. And I'm not sure they work, significantly better than the first one, but it did seem like the first one didn't work quite as well as the second one that I bought.
Cool. You all set?
Yeah, I'm done.
I don't have a ton to. Come on, share, turn on. Let's see. Let's start over here with Slack. So last week I was about to run some tests, which I did, and bottom line is they ran, but they weren't. They didn't track as well as I wanted to, and I think some of that was because of speed. I think I did probably exceeded for me in my setup, I think somewhere between 0.5 meter a second and 0.75 meters a second. I think I can get decent results. and I think I was pushing the speed too much. Plus, I didn't look ahead, was all at 2.5 meters. And so the next step for me is to go run some more tests and adjust the look ahead speed. What you're seeing on the screen is some programming that I did to the path generator. Just assumes the look ahead is going to be the same no matter, and I adjusted it a bit so that I can run a look ahead of maybe a meter on, the turn versus the straight. So that code is referenced over here on the link in Slack. Also, let's see, what did I updated the Pure Pursuit program, because if I ever get to a point where I can actually cut grass in some sort of repeatable process, there's different sections of the plot or the land, and so once I finish one, I've got to go to another one. And at the moment, my clunky, what I'll call clunky process really doesn't allow for anything even closely resembling an elegant way of getting a new path installed. So I went into Pure Pursuit. I added a couple of new functions. One for this check for new path, and basically it's checking the parameter file that if I, send a command similar to this, it's going to say, hey, I've got a new input file that I need to go look at, and it's going to then load the path from file. So that was a little bit of an argy-bargy process of figuring out how to get this into whether it was a separate class, whether it was going to be a part of the other class, and if it's part of the existing class. It was just, I mean, I'm a tortured programmer at best, and it was just a challenge. So ultimately what I did is, here's the main function. The controller starts here. There's a construct there, and after the construct is done, it runs this initialize function, which is, I ended up making it a part of the main class, and I'm trying to find my way to there. Probably a faster way to do that. So anyway, I moved some things around into this construct, and I didn't know it, but you can put a ROS info message that says, hey, the construct is done. And then there's an initialize function that took some of the way he had it originally organized, these were sort of tucked down in the bottom of the program. So I pulled those into the initialize. Loaded the first file, and then somewhere in here is here's the timer. Created a timer that runs every 10 seconds to go check for the new path. And then in that callback, it calls the, I don't know why I separated those. Anyway, but in that callback, it then calls the load function. So that was, and I tested this with in simulation, but I haven't tested it in the real world. So until I do that, all bets are off. And then the last thing that I was working on is making it a little bit easier to generate a path. And again, I have a clunky process. And I'm just trying to make it a little bit more simple. I'm not done yet, but I'll show you what I've got done so far. And I was using a Jupyter notebook in order to do that because I can mix having sort of documentation or the written word plus executing some code plus having the output of that code all in one place. So where I'm at the moment is this is just a little function that takes the lawn data and generates a plot of the outer bounds. This will then create the line segments, which look like that in the plot. And then it's probably hard to see where you're based on the zoom here, but there's a couple of lines that the edges, create a multi-path segment. So I don't really want those. So I trim it off to get, what I'll call a full line. And so this simple code does that and then reprints these line segments. And the next step, this is just an image that I created, but effectively what I'm taking is those line segments and I've got to calculate some points to then be the U-turns. And although I've done that in other code and spreadsheets, I've got to pull that into something more consistent. So that's where I'm at the moment, is going through that process. So those were the things to share today. Any questions or comments about any of that?
Back to your statement, you said you took that loading of parameters, you put that into the initialize as opposed to where it was. The reason why that was separate is so you could run that dynamic reconfigure program, so you could change his parameters on the fly, is why it was somewhere different to start with.
That makes sense. So
Now, if you're not running dynamic reconfigure, maybe you don't care. You probably still have callbacks for it in there, so that may or may not be an issue. I don't know. Anyway, that's why it was separate originally.
Yeah, well, there you go. There's probably wouldn't be the first program that I tore up and made worse, so we'll see how it works for me.
So another thing that just came up a couple days ago, somebody put a comment on one of my YouTube videos on my channel, and he said it's one where it had this vehicle here driving around out in the snow in front of my yard. So it really wasn't doing anything other than starting on the sidewalk, driving down a path and going up and down the sidewalk. And his comment was, "What are you using for steering actuator on that cart?" is what he said. And I thought, well, basically it's that RC servo from MPJA, which I haven't told him that yet. What I thought, well, I probably have stuff on both ROS agriculture and on our stuff that would be talking about all that stuff. So I spent all day, I don't think it was yesterday, I think it was the day before. I started like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, worked until like 11 o'clock at night digging through. I started with the ROS agriculture index, and I just simply said search for steer, and they gave me like 179 entries. So of those 179, maybe 50 were actually, something about what we're doing here. Because the other thing is, there might be a block and it might say steer 5 times in one video, and I only needed one of those or whatever. So I pulled those out, and then I thought, well, if I'd go look at them, so that I went through each video and went to that particular location to see what it was talking about. And I did find it where it says, here's the first one. I mounted the Super 200 servo onto my axle. And then another, the next one that I was going to put up, it says, well, here I changed the control arm on that. It had a big long control arm, what, 4 inches or something on it. And then the next video says, well, I moved it down here where I just put it on the little round wheel. So I got rid of that big lever arm on there. Then the third video says I replaced that with one of the Chinese servos, which is the actual the one that's on my vehicle right now from MPJA. So I was just thinking, is it worth trying to, cut all the stuff and make I could pull up a video editor program and cut and paste all the stuff into just one story saying, I built this thing and I, because one of the things I found, it says, well, here's my go-kart parts that I got for the front end. And I got another one that says, here's the welded up front end. And then another one, just the pieces, the frame laying on the table. So, to do a complete story, just pick out all the stuff we've done over the years and stick them all together like that to do something. And for right now, I figure, well, if he wants to know what I use for a steering actuator, if I show him the videos point to the videos that says, this is how it's mounted on the vehicle. And then it's got the video of it moving back and forth. So that might be good. And then when I go on to our lawn tractor stuff, the separate group, I noticed on there, I've got basically the whole story, that little robot that I was building where I started off and says, here, I can take this little block of plastic and make wheel adjustments out of it. And, from there, it's got all the steps. For a while there, like every week I was telling stuff about how that worked. So that's another case, either just cut those, get a video editor and cut those, make a story out of it, or just simply have a list of links saying, go to this video at this time and it talks about it. Go to this next video at this time and talk about it. That'd probably be the simplest way to do that right now. So that's just something else that has come up in this last week that I was trying to decide, is it worth doing any of that? And if so, how much effort should be put into it?
And your last suggestion seems good to me, giving 2 or 3 links and
And then the next issue is, since he placed it as a comment, says, what did you use for that? I could put all the links right there, or what would make more sense is say, well, I use this servo, but go look at this text file. So I'll put a text file out somewhere, say on my web page, and then in there put 2 or 3 links, and I can come back later and make it 4 or 5 links, or make it 10 links. Because rather than putting this stuff all over the place, it's good to have one thing that you're controlling, and just have a link that links that would point to that and say, oh, go look at this for the latest updated info or whatever. So that's just more things that, as I try to maintain stuff on the internet, you start thinking about, how do you do this so it's going to work out better in the long run.
cool. That's it for me.
That's it for me too. Let's see, do we need standard comments at the end? I can't. Again, I'll just say, if you want to see our other stuff, go to the description on this YouTube video, and it's got links to various things. And it may let me put pictures on the end this time. It seems to be about 50-50 of whether to let me do that or not. So I guess that's the last comment on that. So I guess we're done.